Okay, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, April 20th. This is the regular meeting of the Darien Representative Town Meeting. I'm Krista McNamara, your Darien Town Clerk, with 53 reported attendees. I'm still missing some districts, so we do have more than 53 here, but it's enough to get us started. The meeting is called to order. Before I hand over the podium to the moderator, I just wanted to have two announcements. The first, I'd like to have you join me in welcoming two new members to District 3 who were recently voted in by their fellow district members. If you could join me in welcoming Aurora Marr from District 3. Aurora, you mind standing? Thank you. And the other recently voted in member is Jeanette Lewis, whom I don't see here. So Jeanette Lewis is the other newest member of the RTM. For those watching and for those of you here, there are vacancies that still remain in District 3 and District 5. So as you're out and about, District 3 and District 5 still have vacancies. And with that, I will turn it over to your moderator, Seth Morton.
Greetings and welcome, everybody. First item on our agenda tonight, by the way, we can start at 7:30, but it means that you have to get here earlier than 7:30 so we could take attendance so we make sure we have a quorum. But happy to start at 7:30. First item on the agenda is acceptance of the agenda. Without objection, I'll accept the agenda. Any objections? Thank you. Next item is approving the minutes of March 2nd. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Yes, Amy. And a second, please. Yes, all right. Numerous. Any corrections, additions, changes? I hear, see none. Great. Then I would just say all those in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any noes? No, I don't hear any. Abstentions? Great. Minutes stand approved. Next item is the election of a fifth member to the Board of Ethics. We have one nominee. Is it Dave Smith? Dave Smith? Yeah. So I'll take a motion to have Dave Smith put in a nomination for the Board of Ethics. Okay, and a second? Okay. Now, are there any other nominees? Any other persons who you want to nominate? All right, then we have one nominee. We'll proceed with the vote. You've all filled out. You've got the forms to fill out. The ballot's good. Then we'll proceed with the vote if the district chairs will collect the votes. Yes. Oh, David, did you want to? Okay. Didn't see you there, David.
Thank you, Seth. Just so that everybody knows who this guy Smith is. Likely story. My name is Dave Smith, and I just want to say I'm glad to be here and appreciate your vote for the Ethics Committee. And I'm from Stanford and recently moved last year to Darien, lived overseas for many, many years with my wife and 3 children, have 9 grandchildren, 3 of which live in Darien now. So that's one of the reasons we moved to Darien. And I want to become involved in town government, so this gives me the reason to do that. So I appreciate your vote, and thanks very much. So you can put a Smith with a face now. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Zagrodsky's gonna love that. That I need, that piece of paper.
There you go.
That's very
All
important.
right, clear?
Thank you, sir.
Just watch out for the spaghetti.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I did it. That. I had to turn
Okay,
that off.
yep.
No, I understand, but these computers are here on the book. That's right, I'm gonna sit over here.
Sir, can we move this thing, because it's in the way? If I moved it, it would connect.
No,
Or
we
disconnect.
need
This, just move this over, I just don't want to,
I have to
yeah. Yeah. This presentation doesn't come. Yeah, we just move it right over here, just so that it doesn't interfere with the
I
other
just,
people.
if we can close it, that works.
All right,
Fine.
all right. Okay, I'm going to, while we're counting the ballots, I'm going to proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is 2604, approve amending an appropriation bond authorization of $4.7 million for the sanitary sewer system. And primary is Finance and Budget, Jack Davis.
There's a bunch of wires back here, so anybody coming up, be careful. I'm Jack Davis, District 3, Finance and Budget Chair. I move Resolution 26-4, amending an appropriation and bond authorization of $4,697,300 for the sanitary sewer system project to increase the appropriation and bond authorization by $1,705,500 to $6,402,800. Do I have a second? I have Peter. If there's no objection, I will waive the reading of the resolution. Our report tonight will be on the financial aspects of this resolution. This incremental funding purpose was included in the RTM packet and will be addressed specifically in the RTM Public Works report. Our report is going to be on two basic areas, and this actually shortens the final report of the evening. Regarding the Sewer Commission, please note that it operates as a separate authority within the town and oversees the sanitary sewer system. As part of the annual budget meeting resolution, which will be Section G this year, the RTM approves appropriations for the following three Sewer Commission funds: the Sewer Operating Fund for the purpose of meeting the Sewer Commission's expenses, the Sewer Assessment Fund, and the Sewer Capital Fund. It's important to clarify that the cost of the sewer system is a closed fund and does not affect the mill rate. The cost of operations and debt repayment are borne solely by the 5,400-plus residences, business, and commercial properties connected to the sanitary sewer system. To reiterate, the sanitary sewer system costs and debt repayment do not impact or have any bearing on the town's mill rate. The Sewer Authority bonding and debt repayments. As a reminder, I probably said this before, only the town of Darien is authorized to issue debt. The Sewer Commission debt repayment is funded by the users of the sanitary sewer system and is transferred to the town annually. These debt repayments amounts are embedded in the sanitary sewer user assessment fees. The original appropriation of this bond authorization was approved by the RTM on October 19, 2020 for $2,340,000. On January 22, 2024, the RTM approved an increase of $2,357,300, bringing that appropriation of bond authorization to the $4,697,300. This current request is the second authorization to increase that original appropriation and bond authorization by $1,705,500, which would raise the total amount to $6,403,800. If approved, the estimated annual cost of the specific amount will be $121,000 per year. But again, that's only for those within the sewer system, not for town debt of which we're paying taxes on. My standard waiver is that this calculation, the Board of Finance structures all debt, and the annual estimated incremental cost may vary due to interest rates and bond structure. Again, the reminder that the estimated increase in debt payment will be paid solely by those using the sanitary sewer system and does not and will not affect the mill rate. You'll hear me say that several times tonight. The RTM Finance and Budget Committee unanimously voted in favor of the third authorization and recommends the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Speaking on behalf of Public Works, Jeff Kraus.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Kraus, District 3, Chairman of the Public Works Committee. The Public Works Committee met on April 9th to consider 26-04, the appropriation and bond authorization amendment before us this evening. The primary purpose of this amendment is to fund the third phase of engineering, planning, remediation, and structural maintenance of the sanitary sewer system in Darien. Specifically, this funding will extend the construction phase for remediation of the identified infiltration issues in the first 2/3 of the sanitary sewer system, which have already been identified and solutions engineered in earlier phases of the project. So this is the third phase that we're entering now. So we're doing the construction on those problems that were identified earlier. Second, it will begin the assessment and remediation engineering for the final 1/3 of the sanitary sewer system not yet completed. And third, it will continue the annual CCTV inspection and cleaning of 8 miles of the sewer system that are required each year. The proposed amendment is a planned and well-anticipated milestone in the decade-long project to reinforce Darien's sanitary sewer system, protecting it for many years to come. Sustained inspection, proper engineering, and rehabilitation of the sewer infrastructure is a necessary function, and the $1.7 million cost of the next phase is prudent and aligned to the ability of the sewer commissions and the ratepayers' ability to fund. The RTM Public Works Committee has closely followed the progress of this effort since its start in 2019 and has consistently supported the phased approach the town and the sewer commission have followed. The Public Works Committee of the RTM considered and voted to approve this resolution unanimously and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other committees that wish to report? Town officials? Okay. The body, any questions from the body? Yes, Annie.
Andy Millard, District 4. What is the impact on user fees?
Does anybody have a, okay.
Again, this was an estimate. We used a 4% rate, a 20-year straight payment of principal, which is not our typical way of how we're doing bonding. But under that, it would be $121,000 a year. Since there's 5,000 users there, this would add it into the total amount of what's being done. So it's going to have only a minor effect on the rate. If I divide that by 5,000, it's approximately, something like 20-something cents or something like that, 20, 25 cents to your rate, total rate, if everything is spread evenly. $20, right. So, sorry. Missed a zero there.
Okay. Any other questions from the body? Electors of the town? See none? Look like ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise. No votes, please? And abstentions? Okay. We'll go ahead and proceed. Next item is acceptance of a gift of forensic equipment from the Darien Foundation. And who? Public Health and Safety. Oh, Violet, okay.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's Violet Aldea, District 6, Chair of Public Health and Safety Committee. Our committee met on April 20th with 9 out of 16 PH&S committee members present, representing a quorum, to consider the resolution authorizing acceptance of a gift to the Darien Police Department valued at $71,756 from the Darien Foundation. Do I need to read the whole thing? Or? Unless any objection, I'll waive the reading of the entire resolution. Can I waive it? Any objections? Okay. With this generous donation from the Darien Foundation, the Darien Police Department would benefit from new equipment for the crime lab and computer lab, including forensic workstation, imaging kit, writing blocker, black box, blocker locker, NAS and HDD, macro photography kit, fuming chamber, narcotics testing chamber, and several other items. This equipment will allow the Darien Police to complete crime analysis faster and reduce turnaround time by completing forensic analysis locally, instead of sending out to the state. We are very grateful for the Darien Foundation and thank the organization for this donation. The PHNS committee is supportive of the proposal with a unanimous vote of yes, and we recommend approval of the resolution and gift and recommend that the RTM do the same. Thank you.
Yes, move it, yes.
May I have a
I want to move
move,
the item.
a motion to move the resolution?
Yes, and now you ask for a
First,
second.
okay, in a second. Thank you. Thank you.
There you go,
My
Violet.
first one.
Thanks, guys. So when I got a little changed up because Jack decided that he'd have a distinguished substitute step up for him. So secondary for F&P is Per Sexy.
Good evening. I am Per Sexa, District 4, Vice Chair of the RTM F&B Committee. Thank you, Violet, for an excellent report. I'm going to do my best not to duplicate anything you said and just cover what the Finance and Budget Committee reviewed. As a reminder, in accordance with Section 2-33 of the Darien Code of Ordinances, all gifts given to the town in excess of $12,500 require both the Board of Selectmen and the RTM approval. This gift is going to be part of the Darien Police Department Crime Lab and Computer Forensic Lab, and as Violet outlined, it has many useful purposes. There are 9 pieces of equipment valued at $71,756. The equipment was listed in the packet sent to RTM members prior to this meeting. 3 pieces of equipment have a lifespan of 5 to 7 years with no maintenance or annual costs. 4 pieces have a lifespan of 10 years, and 2 of those have maintenance costs of $800 and $500 respectively. Only one of those annual costs is incremental to the existing police budget. 2 pieces have lifespans in excess of 15 years with no maintenance costs. The committee would like to thank the Darien Foundation for this generous gift and continued support for the town of Darien and the community as a whole. In its meeting on April 13th, the RTM Finance and Budget Committee voted unanimously in favor of accepting this gift from the Darien Foundation and recommends the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other committees that wish to report? Don't see any. Town officials? Questions from the body? See none. Electors of the town? Ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. Dave Smith was elected to the Board of Ethics. And on 2604, bond increase for sewer system, 74 in favor, 1 no, and 3 abstentions. No votes, please. And abstentions? See none. Okay, let's, while we're getting the votes in, we'll move on to the next. Next item is 2606, approve adoption of an ordinance for the abatement of illicit stump pump discharge. Public Works, Patrick Kane will speak.
That's okay. I'll start. Yeah, that's all right. I can start. It will automatically pop.
Let's make sure. I'm going to leave you up for all of it.
That's fine. All this for one slide.
It only takes one.
That's all right. Of course, it's updating. I'll start.
One second. Thanks. It should just pop right up, but let's make sure, okay?
Okay.
All right.
That's all right. We'll just let it go.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Patrick Kane, District 1, Vice Chair of the Public Works Committee. I move Resolution 2606, approving the adoption of an ordinance for the abatement of illicit sewer pump discharge into the public sewers. Do I have a second? Patty Baumgartner. Thank you, Patty. Unless there is an objection, I will waive the reading of the resolution. Before I begin my report, I've been asked to make a quick public service announcement. The original RTM packet that you received a couple of weeks ago contained the wrong version of the Sewer Commission regulations that had been approved. This document is only supporting document. We're not voting on that this evening. But the committees which worked on this ordinance, which I'm going to describe, they were working from the correct regulations. So this is a simple version, a case of version control. So you all received the proper copy this afternoon. With that out of the way, my report is somewhat lengthy. I'll try and be as efficient with your time as I can. This is the second consideration of this ordinance. The last version was tabled last fall, you'll recall, after a number of important questions were raised regarding some aspects of the proposed ordinance. I believe the current version that we're considering tonight covers those issues, though it is not perfect. Before getting into the details of the ordinance, it might be helpful to provide some background on how we got to this point. I hope you all read the First Selectman's town letter from Friday, March 9th, wherein Mr. Zagrodzky provided a very helpful history and description of the Darien sewer system. From that letter, you'll understand that we have two sewer systems in town. The first one is our storm drain system, which collects rainwater and directs it downstream, ultimately to Long Island Sound. The second sewer system is our sanitary sewer system, which collects and pumps dirty sewer water, or effluent, which is generated from homes and businesses, and pumps it to the Stamford Sewage Treatment Plant, which processes it for a fee. Most people use the term sewer interchangeably. To be clear, the ordinance we're discussing this evening is focused solely on the sanitary sewer system, which services approximately 80% of town properties. All operating expenses, as Jack has mentioned a number of times, of the sanitary sewer system are paid for by the 5,470 or so sewer users, not the Darien taxpayers. While all sewer users are taxpayers, not all taxpayers are sewer users. This is an important distinction. Now to the problem at hand. For over 20 years, probably longer, the Darien sanitary sewer system has been needlessly pumping millions of gallons of clean water to the Stanford Sewage Treatment Plant for processing every year. This clean water is referred to by sewer groupies and aficionados as I&I. That means inflow, which is from direct connections like sump pumps and downspouts and curtain drains. The second I stands for infiltration, which results from cracks or breaches in sewer lines and leaky manhole covers. So how do we know how much water is flowing into, clean water is flowing into the sanitary sewer system? As you probably know, sewer users are billed by the Darien Sewer Commission based on the amount of water that they purchase from Aquarian Water. But for irrigation systems, nearly all of that water purchased ends up going down the sanitary drain, literally. I hope you can all, we don't have the graphic up, but you all received the graphic in your packets 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you want to try and bring it up. It'll be quite helpful.
Absolutely. System updates. Escape. You want to get away from that. It's telling us to sign in, so we're SOL. Where is that?
Opt out and back up.
Oh yeah, yep, there we go. Thank you. All right, here we go. There we go. Ta-da.
There we go.
There we go.
Great, thank you. So this graphic was put together by Susan Cameron. Thank you, Susan, from the Darien Sewer Commission. Can you all see that? The red bars represent the amount of water pumped into Darien by Aquarian Water, and the blue bars represent the total amount of sewage flows sent to the Stanford Sewage Treatment Plant for processing. The disparity between these two bars defines the I&I problem. That's the clean water. This is the amount of excess water making its way into the Darien sanitary sewer system. The amount of sewage pumped out of Darien should be closely related to the amount of water pumped from Aquarian Water. As you can see, it's not. So how much water are we talking about? If you can read the numbers on that graph, in the past 5 years alone, Darien has pumped over 2.1 billion gallons, that's billions with a B, of clean water to the Stanford Sewage Treatment Plant for processing. Clean water makes up 44% of total flows over the past 5 years. This I&I is costing Darien sewer users over $1 million annually, just in processing fees. But I&I also overloads the system during wet weather, causing sewage backups, overflows into homes and businesses, onto our streets and onto our properties. These backups can cause property damage, environmental damage, and result in much higher maintenance costs, such as pipes, fittings, pumps wear out faster, etc. This is obviously unsustainable, particularly given the amount of new development in town over the past 10 years, with all of that additional load now coming online. So where is this excess water coming from? At the bottom of the graphic, you can see the amount of rainfall in Darien expressed in inches per year. As the rainfall changes from year to year, the amount of sewage flows change. As you can see, the flows increase, the amount of flows increase significantly during wet years. So there's a much higher correlation of sewage flows to rainfall than there is to Aquarian water purchased. We also know that certain pumping stations work much harder and for longer periods than normal after significant weather events. So, in 2019, the Darien Sewer Commission initiated a multi-million-dollar engineering program to analyze and correct the infiltration problem. That's the leaks and the breaks in the system. The first resolution that we just passed was related to the funding of the next phase of that program. which cleans out and visually inspects the entire system to find cracks and leakage. Once leakage and problems are revealed, repairs are undertaken, replacing or relining the pipes. This program is about 2/3 complete and has helped to only modestly reduce the amount of excess water making its way into the system. While there is certainly more work to do, reducing the amount of water infiltrating from cracks and leakage addresses only the infiltration issue, which we now know is only a small part of the problem. That program does not address the excess water from direct illegal connections from sump pumps and downspouts. So in 2022, the Darien Sewer Commission launched a parallel program to identify the sources of inflowing water from illegal direct connections from sump pumps and downspouts. As part of that program, the Commission has sent information requests to each sewer user for the past 4 years, asking if they had a sump pump and if it was connected to the sanitary sewer system. Every year, every sewer user has received these information requests. Unfortunately, less than 1% of those who receive those requests returned them. Less than 1%, actually. That's less than 55 people out of 5,470. This is why the Sewer Commission has requested the town's assistance through the ordinance that we're discussing tonight. The working thesis is that somewhere between 10 and 20% of sewer users may have sump pumps or illegal connections dumping into the sanitary sewer system, but this is just an estimate. We don't know. That means, conversely, that 80 to 90% of sewer users are funding the illicit behavior of the other 10 to 20%. That's simply not fair. The Sewer Commission recently adopted new regulations and is planning to resend new information requests called sump pump compliance statements to all sewer users, who will now be required to attest that they do not have a sump pump discharging into the sanitary sewer system. The new sewer regulations call for a penalty to be imposed on sewer users who do not return the sump pump's compliance statement in a timely manner with the required information. This is where the RTM comes into the process. The Darien Sewer Commission has certain limits on its authority. They do not currently have the authority to assess fines on users for not returning information requests, such as the sump pump compliance statement. However, state law does empower towns to impose penalties for that type of non-compliance or for not returning information requests. So the point of the ordinance this evening is to allow the Sewer Commission to, in effect, borrow the town's vested authority to impose this type of fine. The amount of the fine is set by the Sewer Commission and will, according to sewer regulations, be imposed on users who fail to return the completed sump pumps compliance statements in a timely manner. The Sewer Commission has set that fine at $250. Those who do return completed surveys on time will not be fined. That is all this ordinance is about, providing the Sewer Commission with access to the town's fining authority on the sump pump compliance statement. Now, throughout this process, a number of good questions have been raised by many of you on both this ordinance as well as many aspects of the new and existing sewer regulations. To be clear, the sewer regulations are not up for debate by this body. They are within the purview of the authority of the Sewer Commission. However, there are a few key elements of this ordinance which are worth highlighting. For example, sewer users who have a sump pump connected to the sanitary sewer system who return their completed compliance statements on time are automatically provided a 6-month safe harbor period to disconnect their sump pump or downspout without being fined for noncompliance. If a sewer user needs more time to find a contractor or work out a solution, the superintendent of sewers will work with the sewer user and has the authority to extend their safe harbor status. By contrast, according to existing sewer regulations, if the superintendent of sewers identifies an illegal connection, that has not been disclosed by the sewer user, that sewer user has only 30 days to rectify the situation, after which they may be subjected to additional daily fines. Again, that is part of current regulation and not a part of this ordinance. Another example of a highlight of this ordinance is if a sewer user does not know whether or not they have their sump pump is connected to the sanitary sewer system, the superintendent of sewers will, with the property owner's permission, provide on-site testing assistance to determine where the flows from that sump pump or downspout are directed. There have also been a number of questions regarding the provision of financial assistance for sewer users with limited financial means to disconnect their sump pumps from the sanitary sewer system. The Sewer Commission has committed to developing a program to assist those users. I understand that an outline of that program is under discussion now. Any financial assistance program will be developed and administered by the Darien Sewer Commission, not the town. At this point, the Sewer Commission does not yet have enough information to know how many users have direct connections or how many may need financial assistance. The Sewer Commission needs the sump pump's compliance statements to be returned before a financial assistance program can move from concept to reality. There is one phrase in the ordinance that I would like to highlight, which references limits on the Sewer Commission's authority regarding, quote, entering a building on a property. I want to be crystal clear here. Neither the Sewer Commission, Superintendent of Sewers, nor the town has the intent nor the authority to enter a private property without the property owner's permission. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is alive and well in Darien. I oppose that wording as part of the ordinance and remain confused as to why it is still a provision that remains in the ordinance draft. To be clear, the overriding objective of the new sewer regulations and this proposed ordinance is to obtain information from sewer users to significantly reduce the excess clean water flowing into the sanitary sewer system, not collect fines. With or without this ordinance, sump pumps connected to the sanitary sewer system violate both local law and state plumbing code. We are very lucky to live in a small town like Darien, which has a benevolent and hardworking sewer commission and a benevolent superintendent of sewers. They do not want to assess fines. They are simply focused on reducing the amount of clean water flowing into the sanitary sewer system to protect that system and save users money. If you lived in a city like Stamford or Bridgeport or Brooklyn, the process of addressing illicit connections to the sanitary sewer system would likely have a very different and less empathetic tone. Finally, the Public Works Committee met on March 12th with 10 of 13 members present, constituting a quorum. The committee voted 9 in favor, 1 opposed to this resolution, and recommends the full RTM do the same. The member who voted no was opposed to the wording of the ordinance, not the overall intent of the ordinance. Thank you.
Very nice, Patrick. Nice going. Next, on behalf of Finance and Budget, Jack Davis.
I'm Jack Davis, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. Thank you, Patrick, for that report. I will attempt not to repeat comments already made by this report and the ones that I know are coming down the road. As previously stated, the Sewer Commission is a separate and distinct entity. Consequently, all financial matters associated with this ordinance or its corresponding regulations will have no effect on the town mill rate. I told you I was going to repeat that several times. The committee has held several meetings on this topic involving Craig Flaherty, the Sewer Commission Chair, and Robert Burney, the Town Attorney. While our review encompassed the ordinance, it also included Article 11, Article 13 of the regulations, and the correspondence intended for residences, businesses, and commercial property serviced by the sanitary sewer system. Please note that this resolution pertains specifically only to the ordinance that is before us tonight. It's important to reiterate that the illicit discharge of sump pumps into the sanitary sewer system is already a violation of the state plumbing code and the town law that was established in the 1970s in Article 11. So this isn't something new where you weren't supposed to do it. It was against the law for plumbers or builders to do those connections. This ordinance simply extends to the Sewer Commission the authority to issue fines for the improper return of the requested sump pump compliance statement or any other related information. The RTM Finance and Budget Committee approved this resolution with 8 in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention. While the dissenting vote understood that the potential savings would be beneficial, the specific concerns that led to the dissenting vote were as follows. Concern that Darien is taking the lead on the sump pump illicit discharge initiative, the heavy-handed nature of the fines for those who do not comply with returning the sump pump, or more importantly, by misrepresenting information on the form. The financial assistance is still in the works and not known, and what was perceived to be the cost to homeowners to hire engineers to determine if their sump pump is discharging illegally, it was felt that these costs should be covered by the commission, which we just heard. The commission will be assisting homeowners if they're not sure where their discharge goes. Despite these concerns, the RTM Finance and Budget Committee recommends this ordinance to be approved by the full RTM. Thank you.
Speaking on behalf of TGS&A, David Bain.
Thank you, Seth. I'll try to set up here without knocking anything down. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Bain. I'm from District 5 and chair of TGS&A. TGS&A met on February 12 with a quorum of 10 of 10 members present, and again on March 5 with a quorum of 7 of 10 members to discuss the Sewer Commission's request the RTM adopt the sump pump ordinance before us tonight. At our February 12 meeting, the Director of Public Works, Ed Gentile, with members of the Sewer Commission and Town Council, explained the background of the proposed ordinance and regulations. I won't repeat what others have already said about the financial and infrastructure problems that the ordinance is intended to address, but I'll focus tonight's report on TGS&A's consideration of the ordinance and the regulations adopted pursuant to it. Now, as by way of background, while the Sewer Commission is authorized by state law to issue regulations concerning the use of Darien sewers, it lacks clear authority to impose the fines set forth in its regulations, and it's requesting the RTM as the town's legislative body to delegate its authority to the Sewer Commission for the purposes of regulating the discharge of storm and sewer water, or groundwater, into the sewer system. Now, because the Sewer Commission is asking the RTM to delegate its fining authority for use in its regulations, TGS&A spent a significant amount of time exploring the regulations with our guests, and we suggested a number of changes to them, many of which were actually adopted by the Sewer Commission at its March 3 meeting before TGS&A met again on March 5 to vote on the proposed ordinance. So DPW Director Ed Gentile and members of the Sewer Commission, Susan Cameron and Reese Hutchison, explained that the purpose of the ordinance and regulations is really just to obtain information from property owners about whether they have sump pumps discharging clean water into the sewer system. And to that end, the regulations authorize the Sewer Commission to send the sump pump compliance statements that Patrick discussed earlier to all property owners using Darien's sanitary sewer system. Now, in order to encourage people to accurately and honestly report on their compliance statements what's happening with their properties, the regulations divide the sump pump discharges into two categories. One is authorized discharges, and the other is illicit discharges. An authorized discharge is one that's reported to the Sewer Commission via a sump pump compliance statement, which the Superintendent of Sewer Services, currently our DPW Director, agrees may continue for a period of time, generally up to 6 months, while the property owner addresses the situation. An illicit discharge is everything else, and it has to be remedied within 30 days, period, stop, full end. Because not all properties and property owners are the same, the regulations specifically provide that the superintendent is to give special consideration to property owners needing additional time to remediate improper sump pump hookups. And at the request of TGS&A, several examples of criteria making a property owner eligible for that special consideration were added to the ordinance, or to the regulations, excuse me. Those additional criteria include taking into account the physical aspects or characteristics of the property, whether the property owner is elderly or disabled, or whether there's some other characteristics or circumstances that warrant an extension of time for a property owner to continue an authorized discharge pursuant to these regulations. The regulations also provide that the Superintendent of Sewer Services may not unreasonably withhold approval of reasonable requests for extensions or corrective action plans that extend beyond the general 6-month deadline for correcting an authorized discharge. The point of TGS&A's review and requests for changes to the regulations was to ensure that there were adequate protections for property owners, and to attempt to codify to the greatest extent possible the promises of the Sewer Commission and the Darien Public Works Department that they're going to work with property owners to cure this problem in a reasonable and thoughtful way that doesn't impose unreasonable burdens on property owners who can't shoulder them, and also doesn't create other problems for other property owners in the nearby vicinity or to the town generally. However, with that carrot being held out by the DPW and the Sewer Commission, there's also a stick. And the regulations do provide for a fine of $250, which is the maximum amount permitted by state law, for the failure to return a sump pump compliance statement within 90 days, or if a property owner returns one with misleading, false, or incomplete information. Fines may also accumulate if property owners repeatedly fail to return sump pump compliance statements, and there's also another $100 fine in another regulation for the failure to remove an illicit discharge within 30 days. It's also important to point out that there is a safe harbor provision in the regulations stating that as long as a property owner is working with the town to remediate an authorized discharge, fines will not be imposed. If a property owner feels that they've been improperly fined, then they have, of course, recourse to go to the Sewer Commission and appeal that fine. And if they're unhappy with what the Sewer Commission does, then they can go to court and appeal the fines in the Superior Court here in Connecticut. Now, TGS&A has repeatedly assured TGS&A, was repeatedly assured by members of the Sewer Commission and Mr. Gentile that the purpose of these regulations is not to be punitive in any way or even to raise revenue for the Sewer Commission, but instead they're intended to encourage property owners to work with the town to remedy what's becoming a growing and costly problem for all Darien sewer users. Now, at our March 5 meeting, TGS&A focused on the ordinance itself. As you'll see from the language in the ordinance in our packets, it's fairly bare-boned and primarily is intended simply to delegate the RTM's fining authority, and we are the only body with that authority, to the Sewer Commission for the purposes of the regulations I just described. However, because of concerns expressed at the RTM's October 2025 meeting when this ordinance first came forward to this body, and because of the discussion at TGS&A's February 12 meeting about how the regulations are going to be implemented, TGS&A revised the proposed ordinance and inserted a provision called Limitation on Delegated Enforcement Authority. That provision allows the RTM to review, amend, or repeal any regulation authorizing the imposition of fines, penalties, or the entry into a structure. In addition, the provision also requires that the RTM Rules Committee be notified of any such changes to the regulations so that the RTM can act if they don't like what the Sewer Commission has done with the power we're delegating to it in this ordinance. Thus, through this limitation provision in the ordinance, the RTM retains control and ultimate authority and responsibility for how this ordinance and the power we're delegating to the Sewer Commission is going to be used by the Sewer Commission. And if it results in unintended consequences or in some sort of controversy, then the RTM can take action to correct it short of repealing the ordinance entirely. So after debating the ordinance with Town Council at our March 5 meeting, including this new limitation on delegated enforcement authority provision, TGS voted unanimously in favor of the proposed ordinance and to recommend that the RTM adopt it as well. So thank you very much. That's our report.
Thank you, David. Very thorough. And now from Public Health and Safety, Violet.
Thank you, Seth.
You don't have to move anything. You can just.
I'm just
report
going to
it.
read. Thank you, Seth. Violet Aldea, Chair Public Health and Safety. I'm not going to repeat all the details, and thank you, David and Patrick and Jack and everyone who has spoken about. As you can see, there's been a lot of dialogue and a lot of discussion and a lot of care put into this resolution ordinance for the sump pump. And for the PH&S committee, we also met several times, much debate and consideration. And on March 24th, we met. We were 8 out of 14 at the time, PH&S committee members representing a quorum to consider the resolution ordinance. Overall, the committee is supportive of this action, given the need, and as you heard previously, all the reasons why this is an important endeavor. We voted 6 members yes, 1 voted no, and 1 abstention, and we recommend the approval of the resolution ordinance, and RTM do the same. But I'd like to talk a little bit about what we appreciate and what also came up from those that voted no or abstained, just to add that context. The committee acknowledges that the illicit sump pump drainage into the sanitary sewers is an ongoing problem and definitely needs to be addressed. Incurring $1 million a year or more, adds up over time, and we really need to address this for the town and for environmental reasons too. And we appreciate the measured and phased approach with this first step of gathering information to understand the breadth of the issue, and also the provisions that David just walked through in terms of safe harbor for those who disclose, the case-by-case evaluation for each property. There's financial assistance program already being developed. And the oversight and accountability in terms of the RTM retaining control to request the review of fines and implementation and monitoring and adjusting. I wanted to just mention also from a minority perspective, and again, overall support the goal. Some of the concerns that came up had to do with, what do you do with this water once you do find it? What does that solution look like? How extensive is the remediation going to be? Are we redirecting water into our neighbors' properties? Are we increasing street runoff? Are we stressing existing drainage limitations? And so there was, quite a lot of discussion on both sides of the coin of what that could look like. But at the end, the idea is whether or not we start doing something now or wait until future time, and the answer for the committee overall is to try to start do something now. So that is the overall report from PH&S. Thank you.
Thank you, Violet. As you can see, the committees have put in a lot of effort in getting this thing right. And so I think we can feel proud of the work that they've done. Are there any other committees that have any thoughts about this? Okay. Town officials? See none? The body, questions from the body? Yes, Priscilla. Click it.
Okay, there.
Hey.
Priscilla Wong, District 1. I just have a quick question. So how were the compliance statements or questionnaires that had such low return rate in the past, how are they distributed? And how will that be changed so there's a better return in the future?
That is administered by the Sewer Commission, mostly. And, oh, we have a volunteer? Right there.
Thank you. For the record, yeah, I think it's good. My name is Craig Flaherty, Chairman of the Sewer Commission. To the question, the 5 years worth of notices were sent out with the sewer user bill. So everybody that paid their sewer user bill over the last 5 years had in their hand this notice that requested their voluntary cooperation to identify if they had a sump pump and have it disconnected from the sewer. So that's what happened. That's how we administered it.
And so how are you going to change it in the future? How are you going to get a better rate of return?
So again, that was a voluntary request that didn't require anyone to submit anything in response. This is now an affidavit that needs to be filled out and signed and returned, else the user may be fined.
Lois? One sec, I'll get to you, Andy. I'll get you.
I'm Lois Schneider, District 1. I'm on the same page with Priscilla. Having been one of those people that get the bill, I never saw anything that said this. So I don't understand. I have no problem. How can you punish people if they never saw they got it? And you can't send one letter and 90 days later start billing them. So I support what we're trying to do, but somebody needs to look at what materials are going out, how's it doing, and what kind of follow-up there is. And if that's the Public Works Committee, that would be great. But if somebody else, I don't feel really good about the concept of passing all these fines when I don't hear anything about the process that's going to support getting the information that they want.
Okay, Lois. Andy, and I'll get you two later.
District 4 again. I have no sump pump, so I have no skin in this game. But when we have less than 1% response rate, I'd like to add to the two previous comments. Before I can vote on this issue, I'd like to see this alleged survey, and I'd like to see evidence from the printer or whoever inserted them into the envelopes that they actually did it. Quite honestly, I'm skeptical.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dan Coonan, District 4. So I study behavioral science and use it in my work, and this is a clear case of behavioral change where all persuasion is self-persuasion, and there's behavioral science concepts around loss aversion, around social proof, and in similar cases where it's communicated that 80% or 90% of the town is already following the rule and you're not. That's called social proof. People are more likely to follow because of that. Loss aversion shows that people feel losses twice as much as equivalent gains. So if we point to what we're losing as a town and what they're losing as individuals, there's more likely to change behavior. And then clearly myself as well has not received or seen it. So that's not in behavioral science. That's just clarity and communication and having it visible to people, but having some clear messages on there is also important if you're trying to drive behavioral change and not trying to jump right to the stick. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Laura Pesh Gray, District 6, on F&B. My question is really purely from a resident. To Dan's point, if you stated in the letter that you simply have to call the sewer commission and they can come and check and see if it's that simple and you spell it out. Also, if you state how much money that individual, along with others, would be saving, it would probably generate a better response rate.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's that simple. Can the sewer commission come and check out whether somebody is?
Yeah.
It's not clear. Do you have to call your own plumber, or can the town come, if you invite them and say, hey, I would be happy for someone to come and check and see if I'm set up correctly?
The questions that we're raising are under the purview and operation of the sewer commission. If the chair of the sewer commission would like to speak again, I would recognize you, but that's really where you're going to have to sit in with them and walk through how they're going to administer this. Ed, yeah, sure, if it were, just click on the, there, that should do it. I see a green light, that's a positive sign.
Better eyes than I do. Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works. Can you folks hear me? Okay. Just to kind of I don't say broad brush, but cover all the general questions on whether people had gotten them or not. And I have gotten calls back. I have gotten people responding to it, so obviously they did go out. The other piece is this program is set up to do exactly what the last resident had asked for, which is if you have a question about whether you're hooked up or not, we will come out and take a look at it. Somebody from our department or our consulting firm that we're using, and that's something I'm starting to set up right now with the hopes that this does pass, is to get people on board that we can actually get these things moving quickly. So to answer the question, the program that we're talking about tonight is set up exactly to do that, to go out and investigate if the resident needs help.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Other questions? Already seen, I'll get you on after I get everybody else. Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay, I'll get you too. Yes.
Ian Laird, District 5. Just to say it, and I know, thank you, Ed, for that comment, but I can attest I have received that notice. It was on a separately colored piece of paper with my sewer bill, so they have gone out, and I was a bad actor. I chose not to return it. I remember getting it 3 times. I can't speak about 5, but 3. But it has been going out.
Okay. Miss?
Hi, I'm Jessica Engel, District 5, and I also am on TGSNA. I was incredibly skeptical of this ordinance, and I am now very happy with how it's turned out. And I, as a communications professional, am a little concerned by this focus on the dissemination of the requests for information from our town. Our town has a communication problem, as evidenced by how many complaints I get from friends who forgot when the beach passes are required and showed up to Weed Beach last week and were turned away. The communication problem is pervasive throughout our town, and I don't think it's worth throwing out all of the hard work on this ordinance because of concerns about how we communicate with our constituents. I hope and I believe that the Sewer Commission and everyone responsible for getting this information from our town would be collaborative and take any and all suggestions on how to make sure that they communicate well and get responses and remind people. I also think that the text of the ordinance itself allows people to communicate and appeal what they feel are unfair decisions. And given the actual text in the ordinance of showing good cause, someone showing up and saying, I never received this, and therefore the fine is unfair, I think would pretty easily qualify for some grace and an extension based on the text of the ordinance itself. So while I believe wholeheartedly that we should talk about how we communicate and talk about how maybe the paper and the mail route is a little outdated and easy to miss, I also don't think that's worth tanking this ordinance on such an important issue over. I think that's a different conversation that affects probably all of us in here and all of our committees. But right now, the town's common course for communicating is in the mail, often attached to bills. And I don't think that we should be looking for something exceptional here, especially when the ordinance so carefully and thoughtfully allows for fairness if anyone felt that they did not receive that notice and were therefore at a disadvantage.
Thank you. That's good. Yes, Amy?
Hi, Amy Zavatakis, District 5. I just want to reiterate and bring us back to the very first speaker, which is what a big problem this is. Not just a financial problem, but an environmental problem. And we are overloading our sanitary sewer system with stormwater. And that is it's bad for the environment, it's bad for our sewer system, and it's bad for the town. So we need to focus on that. And I want to build on what Jessica said as far as the communication problem. You know, I've seen the yellow notice. I actually didn't realize it needed to be sent back. So that's on me. But yeah, it was a yellow piece of paper in with the sewer bill. I think what we need to do as this body is realize that we are the largest group of people that meet in this town government. So if there's a communication problem, it's on us to start thinking about solving it. We should be going out and talking to our constituents, hey, are you on the town sewer system? Do you have a sump pump? Do you know where it's going? If not, here's Ed's number. We have to start working on the communication because we're the group that has the ability to get that out, because the folks on the sewer commission, there's a heck of a lot less of them. There's only so much they can do. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Any other comments? Yes, Jim.
Jim Cameron, District 4. First of all, I want to offer an apology to the Sewer Commission. This vote has been delayed by months due to a mishandling on our part of a coordination of committees that were supposed to be meeting on this. So we should have dealt with this a long time ago. I have nothing but the highest respect for Mr. Gentile and the Sewer Commission. I think if you watch their meetings on Darien TV, they are as compassionate and empathetic as everybody has hoped they would be in a situation, whether it's appealing a water bill or a sewer bill. So I have every expectations that they're going to be very sympathetic in dealing with this issue. Inflow and infiltration is a serious problem. But this ordinance, although it is much better than the one we saw last in October, I don't think is the solution. We are trying to impose a town-wide penalty on people who are not part of the problem. Public Works knows very well which parts of town, based on the pumping that occurs after a major rainstorm, they know where most of those sump pumps are. They are not in my district, or at least in my immediate neighborhood, because I have constituents, older constituents, who have lived here for 30, 35 years, and they said, yeah, I got a sump pump. It's been turned on exactly 3 times in 30 years. And those years when we saw the heavy rainfalls and the increased flow going to Stanford, those were not years when their sump pumps went on. But we're going to impose upon them what is in effect a tax. They're going to have to go out and find somebody to remediate this situation. We're talking somewhere between $500, I don't know, $1,000. It depends on how ambitious the piping has to be to solve a problem that is not of their creation. They're not part of the problem, but they're going to have to pay for this. So, the next time you're talking to your neighbors at a barbecue this summer, and they ask you, how did you vote on this sump pump ordinance? By the way, it is a record. They can look that up and they can find out who voted yes and who voted no. I hope you have a really good answer for them, because I have a great answer, and that is I'm going to vote no.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts? Yes, Jack?
I appreciate a lot of the comments that I've heard. Number one, they will be sending out. Usually I speak loud enough, I don't need this. They will be sending out second letters to people. So that's number one. Number two, it's going to be a separate letter. It's not within your assessment. I'll be honest, I opened it up, I never knew it was there. This is a separate letter with your code on the letter so that you know how to respond to one part, because I asked how would I know this number, and it's going to be on the envelope. I appreciate that we're concerned about the 5% that's costing me money. This is illegal. It's been illegal for 50 years. This isn't something we're dropping on people. My understanding is that 85% of the people in the RTM are connected to the sewer system. That means 8 of you are potentially illegal, and the rest of us are paying for it. And I don't find that to be fair. So for those who think that we shouldn't be voting for it, my assessment is typically $500 a year. Please let me know when you're giving me my check for paying for the extra money. Thank you.
Precise as always, Jack. Thank you. Any other comments from the body? Oh, here we Rolf.
Rolf Oben, District 4. I'll try not to be redundant to some of the other comments made previously, although I would say that in respect to Ian's statement, yes, I also see the notice that came in the bill, okay? And I would add to that that if you get a bill in the mail from, let's say, Eversource, there's the bill, and then there's always inserts with all kinds of other information. Call me a nerd, but I look at them and I read them, and so someone could certainly have done that with their sewer bill, okay? My concern is the excessive inflow and infiltration that dilutes the sewage and exceeds the sewer system's designed capacity. And when that happens, particularly in storm events, it can cause health dangers because sewer backups can occur, sewer mains, sewer overflows can occur, which can cause sewage to literally be coming out on the street or backing into homes. So this is clearly an environmental issue as well as a public safety issue in that regard. In fact, some of you may not be aware, but a number of years ago, there was a very significant overflow on Post Road in Darien. And a nonprofit organization coerced, shall we say, the town of Darien to engage in an agreement to take steps with our sewer system. And there was certain things that were part of that agreement where we made payments to that organization as well as to the Darien Land Trust, and then engaged in a program of concentrating on rehabilitating the sewer system. And the Sewer Commission has been reporting back on that agreement for years. I think the final year is maybe either this year or next year. So I'm trying to make the point that there is an issue of liability here, and so it should be taken very seriously. And one last comment is that we have a contract with Stanford Water Pollution Control Authority, the people who process our sewage. And that current contract expires at the end of June of 2028. So we have roughly 2 years to try and demonstrate that we are controlling and hopefully, in fact, reducing our I&I to that facility, which would then give the Sewer Commission a great position for them to be in to negotiate a new contract that can hopefully bring down the amount of our participation in contributing dollars to their operation. And so I would like everybody to keep that in mind, because 2 years might sound like a ways off, but it's really not that far away. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Well, a lot of your comments relate to things that Public Works and the Sewer Commission quite obviously will be involved with. It's a step up, and so I would encourage you to dialogue with those folks, and in that way help this whole thing move along. Are there any other comments from the body? Yes, go ahead. Adele, oh, you'd like to, are there any other folks who would like to speak? If you wanted to, are we ready to vote? It looks like we are. If you would withdraw the motion, I'll move to a vote. Thank you, Adele. So, further conversation, ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. Item 2605, the gift of forensic equipment, passed 78 in favor, no noes, 1 abstention. No votes, please. And abstentions. Okay. I'll have the first selectman come up and get organized, get the machine running. Yeah, I did. Oh, yeah. Unanimous.
That's what I'm doing, okay?
You hang in there. One day at a time, as they say. It's your heart open as long as. There we go. Voila.
Well, I didn't think this was going to turn on. Let's see.
Feel good?
No, not yet. It's on. Put this on sleep so it wouldn't have to go through this. So we're going to have to go through this.
Oh, okay, so.
Once you log in.
It's going to see me once again.
There's a setting. Back to your setting.
I'm ready.
Okay, we now have an address by the First Selectman, John Zagrodzky.
I have 400 slides. No. I've got 15 slides. I'm going to try to go quickly. It's pretty late. So the purpose of this is to continue this dialogue we've had about the charter and ordinance review effort that I kicked off earlier this year, and I want to talk about kind of where that stands and also introduce to you guys some of the ideas I've had and give you a general status update and what's next. So as a reminder, I want to go through a few things. I'd like to reiterate the purpose of this effort and talk about what it is and what it is not. I want to give a little bit of attention to the Special Act number 410, which is our governing document for this town, and it's relevant to this effort. I'll go through some of my recommendations, and then let's talk a little bit about next steps. So in terms of the efforts, just this effort and the purpose of this, I just want to reiterate that it's really about two things. It's about trying to get a better volunteer experience, and that comes from a lot of conversations I've had, I know some of you have had, about how our boards and commissions work and whether those are well organized and sufficiently defined such that the people who volunteer on those boards and commissions feel like they're making them a productive use of their time. And then the second part is to try to think about ways to make all of our processes more efficient, and I'll get to that. So as part of this process, we may come up with more ideas than what fit into those two categories, and we should log those and maybe implement a few of them this time. But it's important that we not let those ideas more broadly distract, in my judgment, from the first two goals. Keep in mind that because of the special act that I'll get into, we're able to modify our charter more efficiently than other towns, and so there's no reason that we have to do everything at once. So let's talk a little bit about Special Act 410. This is a very special thing that Darien may actually be unique in the state of Connecticut. And to understand it, it's important to take a look back at how this worked in the past. So our town government really required special acts to change anything. So the Board of Finance was established by a special act of the legislature in 1911. In 1925, planning and zoning was established. In 1951, the RTM was established. We actually had a special act in 1955 establishing our Public Works Department and the Superintendent of Public Works. And that inefficiency led to the creation of what was called the 1957 Home Rule Act. So what Home Rule means is it says that the legislature is going to let towns and municipalities across the state come in and really decide for themselves how they want to organize their government within certain rules. And one of those rules is that if you're going to go modify your charter, there's a whole bunch of kind of rules and regulations that you have to follow. One of them was the creation of a charter review commission, and there's some other provisions. So that act took effect in 1957, and when it took effect, it basically got rid of all of the special acts and everything that sort of preceded it and said, we want towns to go under this Home Rule Act. So another thing to note is what happened in 1965. So the Connecticut State Constitution was revised, and among other things, it made the Home Rule Act from 1957, it set that up as a express right of all municipalities, and as part of that, it forbade going forward this notion that towns could organize their governments with special acts. You're not supposed to do that anymore. And so if you take these two acts, one of them kind of looks back, which is the Home Rule Act that says we're going to clean up all the special acts in the past. The constitutional changes in 1965 look forward and says we're not going to have any special acts. Where does that leave us? Well, right in the middle. So in 1959, 2 years after the Home Rule Act was passed in 1957, we had Special Act 410. What that act did was it created, first thing, it consolidated all the special acts that I described before, and it brought together in one single document our Constitution or our charter. That's actually what set up Darien and what we operate with today. And so if you look through our charter on the town website, I have a copy of the original special act. It's largely the same thing. So the important part of that special act is Section 98 of that act allows this body to make changes in our charter by a majority vote, and that's it. There's some provisions around hearings and all of that, but we don't have to do all the provisions that are required for towns that are under home rule. We can actually modify our charter through this provision in the special act in Section 98. And so that's important context because we want to preserve the ability to do that. This body plays an important role in shaping town government, and through the special act, you're going to be able to reshape our charter without having to go through the provisions that are provided for in the Home Rule Act. So keep that in mind, and there's more to come on this later, but I want to make sure that you had kind of that basic background. Okay. I had arranged for you all to see, which I hope were sent out, copies of the summary recommendations from two prior charter review commissions that were set up, one in 1999 and one in 2008. As I mentioned before, both those efforts failed for reasons that I won't go into. But interestingly, they were charter review commissions that were set up because there was a lack of clarity about the special act that I just described. And in speaking with town council and some of the guidance they provided, interestingly, we don't want to set up a charter review commission because there's some evidence that if we were to do that, it would nullify our ability to make charter changes using the special act going forward. In other words, creating a charter review commission would actually turn us into a home rule town. And that gives up a flexibility that we have that I believe is unique in this state. So you can see some of the recommendations that came out of the 1999 Charter Review Commission, which is what CRC stands for. A couple that I have highlighted in yellow I'm going to speak a little bit about next. But the thing I wanted to point out about this list, and actually the list that I show here, which is from the 2008 summary, is these were pretty comprehensive efforts. If you go back and read the reports, they're these gigantic things that go through all these language changes. They were very complicated. Those commissions worked for months to kind of prepare all these different changes. I think part of the reason that those efforts failed was because they did too much. It was too complicated. It was too radical in terms of the things that they were proposing. And frankly, I think it made people a little bit nervous, and just in talking to some folks who had been affiliated with that. The other thing that it did was when it changes a lot of different things, sometimes people will say, well, I don't want this change. Well, I don't want this change. And you end up with nothing getting changed, which is why I get back to my original premise for this effort, which is we should focus on just a few things, let it settle, and then focus on more things after that. There's no urgency. We've got the time to do it. So in terms of the recommendations from the prior charter review commissions, I'm going to point out a couple that I think merit your attention. So this first one comes from the 1999 effort, and it said briefly, and it was in the materials I sent out, the tax collector, the town clerk, and the town treasurer, upon expiration of their respective terms, shall be employed, not elected. So what is the basis for that? So those have long been elected roles in this town. I believe that it's time that we make a charter revision and we change those roles from elected roles to appointed roles. I think the rationale is as follows. The first thing is that those roles don't have oversight right now. They have, quote, oversight from the electorate, but they don't have oversight in the traditional administration of all the department heads here in Town Hall. So Ed Gentile, who was just here, he's an employee of the town. And as such, all of those employed department head positions report to the town administrator, which then reports to the Board of Selectmen. In my judgment, having now spent 2.5 years in this role, I think it's important for all of those roles to be treated the same, which is why I believe they should be switched from being elected to appointed roles. As I said, it aligns with our department heads. All of our other department heads are managed and treated in that way, and I think having consistency across Town Hall is going to be something that's pretty important. The other thing is that it expands the pool of candidates. Right now, you have to be an elector of the town to be employed or to win election to any of those roles. But like all of our other department heads, by having them appointed, we can appoint anybody to be in those roles, and we can always find the candidates that have the most qualifications. I'd say further that if these were really roles where you'd say, geez, we got to have the input from the electorate to make sure that we're getting the right thing done with these roles, then they would be competitive from time to time. But the fact is none of those three roles have been competitive for at least 20 years, and even only very once in a while prior to that. And the reason for that is that I don't think that when you get to the polls, you're thinking about, well, I've got a competing view in my mind, or I disagree with my neighbor in terms of what the town clerk or what the tax collector should be doing. It's just not the case. Instead, what you're seeing is that these roles are increasingly migrating to become more technical jobs. Most of what they're required to do stem from technical requirements either by licensure or from the state in terms of laws and regulations. These are not roles that lend themselves to being managed by the electorate. They need to be managed by professionals. And finally, I would say that if you want to think about what you want to vote for, what you want to vote for are candidates where there's a real policy choice. So Board of Selectmen, First Selectman, there's a policy choice when you vote for this role. For planning and zoning, in terms of growth of the town, that is a policy choice. For Board of Finance, policy choice. For Board of Education, those are all policy roles, and those are roles that are important to have as elected officials in those positions. For these roles, they are increasingly technical, and in my pretty strong judgment, it's time to make those roles appointed instead of elected. I have teed this up in in-person meetings with the three individuals who hold those roles. The discussion was not about them as individuals or the roles that they play, but much more technically about that position and whether that position needs to be appointed. There's disagreement about that. I'm sure they will be speaking with you at some point. Our tax collector is fine with this change. The treasurer and the clerk are not. And that's okay. We need to have that debate, but I want to get it up and have it in front of everybody, and I will be happy to talk to you about it at some length about why I think this needs to be done. But it is time to make that change in my judgment. Another one that came up was something I'm a little more ambivalent about, but I think it's worth discussing, and this body should consider it. And the change was this, which is the Commission proposes strengthening the system of checks and balances within Darien's government by balancing the Board of Finance's purse string authority with an RTM power to override. So you go back and look at the reason that this was teed up, particularly in the 2008 recommendations, stemmed from the discussion and debate around the Procaccini property, which is where the Kensett housing development is on Hoyt Street right now. Some of you were around for that. There were a lot of folks who were very upset that that property was not purchased because I think it was going to be a town pool, something like that. This was around when I started on the Board of Finance, so I don't quite recall myself. But they were really mad, and they were mad because the RTM did not get a say as to whether that was going to happen, because the minute the Board of Finance votes no, and I know I was on that board, that's it. There's no consideration by this body. And so that's why this came up in those other things. And so it's not as big a deal right now. I think we've improved a lot in terms of how we communicate, and it hasn't come up, but it has come recently. So did anybody here get to vote on the Weed Beach work that we'd proposed for the short lane property? No, you did not, because the Board of Finance said no. And I'm not picking on them. I'm a creature of the Board of Finance. I tell you that. But it's something to think about in terms of how we run the town and what is the power and authority of this board to look at things. So the way this would work and the way it's described in those recommendations is that any Board of Finance action, if subject to would be subject to an override by a supermajority or a 2/3 majority of this body, only if either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Education request you to consider an override. So it wouldn't be something that you would do yourselves, but it would be whether my board or the Board of Ed would ask you to do it. So the theory of the case is that it would rebalance checks and balances among those three elected boards. Interestingly, you already have this power. You can come in and you can decrease an appropriation. So if the Board of Finance comes in and says, we want to spend X and you don't want to spend X, you want to spend less than X, you can do that. Right? This is really just replicating that authority on the other side, only in a constrained circumstance. As I said, I'm not as strongly in favor of this as I was with the change of those other three positions to appointed positions, but I could see a rationale to do that. And it could be part of this body's work in trying to clarify and sharpen up the role that you all have, both in total and as well as with your committees, to increase the relevance and clarity about what the RTM's role is in this town. And I think this is something you might want to consider. Okay. There's one other thing that has come up, and that is more broadly sort of shifting of power. Somebody told me that they had heard that, well, Jay-Z is bringing this whole thing up because he wants to increase his power. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. I'd say anything that does that, I would strongly recommend that you say no. I personally, if I take my hat off and I just put on my citizen hat, I am against increasing the power of the First Selectman or the Board of Selectmen. The reason for that is one of the things I've learned in this role in the 2.5 years that I've had it is that my ability to get something done is not predicated on my statutory powers. I don't really have any. This is actually a weak first selectman role compared to some other towns. But the way this role works is that I have tried very hard to earn the trust and confidence of other elected officials in this town. I speak all the time. You see how I do things. You listen to me on TV. You read my newsletter. You do all of that. And I do that because I think it's important not just to communicate, but to make sure you understand how I think about things so that you have confidence in what I'm doing. Let's say you had a future first selectman and you pass some of these things to increase the power of this office, and that person doesn't do that. I think it's important that if you don't like what I'm saying, that this body and other bodies, you have the ability to shut me down. Now, that means that I have to work pretty carefully to cultivate my relationship with you and the reputation that I have in terms of how I do things and how I explain things and the transparency I try to maintain. If I don't do that, you guys need the power to shut that down. And so anything that changes my role or strengthens that or declares me as a chief executive or allows me to spend money, no. I want to come to you for that, and I'll ask you every time. And if you say no, the answer is no. And I think you want to do that not because of me in this role, but for anyone who holds this role in the future. It's much better for the person in this role to come in and say, all right, if I'm going to be effective, I've got to sell it to everybody in this room and to other elected officials, or it's not going to happen. And if you can't do that, or you don't want to run this job in that fashion, then you should step down and go do something else, because the first selectman in Darien is not the job for you. So there's other things up there in terms of empowering other boards and all of that. I think a lot of that's a distraction and that we really shouldn't spend time on it. And frankly, it was controversial in some of these other Charter Review Commission efforts, and I think would slow us down in making some of the things that making some of the changes that I think are important. Okay, so in terms of kind of a commission recommendation number one, something that I think we should consider. So right now, if you look at all of the boards and commissions that we have that pertain to health and human services and mental health task force, I've listed them out here. In spending some time with all of those boards, there's a lot of confusion as to what all that is. Some of them we don't do anymore. We haven't had a youth commission in, well, since I've been in office. Human Services Commission, I don't think we have that either. We do have Advisory Board of Health, but they haven't met in a while, and that group has been thinking about what to do. It's time to sharpen all that up. Health is pretty important, and I think we can do a better job. So I would propose that we take all of those except Commission on Aging. I think Aging can stand alone based on the work that they do. But all these other boards and commissions pertaining to health, I think we should create something that feels like a well-being committee that could actually take on and have responsibility across the gamut of health and human services and work with both those departments in Town Hall. That's a broad enough mandate where that would be a pretty meaty agenda. And in terms of things like the Mental Health Task Force, rather than having a separate task force that has to meet, the members who are in charge of those different activities in town can report to the Wellbeing Commission every quarter. So there's a way to kind of pull all this together and create, I think, an agenda for that commission that could be extremely compelling and actually be very interesting for people in the health profession to want to be members of that committee. So this is just a straw man idea. This is how I think about it. Obviously, this group needs to take that up, but I'd be happy to talk about that at length to try to get to a better solution. The second commission recommendation I'd like you to consider is with regard to the environment. So we've talked about this a few times. Right now, the Environmental Protection Commission has all the powers of an environmental commission. It was set up that way a long time ago, but when you speak to the members of that commission and you look at the work that they do, the problem is they're so focused on environment at the intersection with development that they don't have time to focus on these broader environmental issues. And I think as a town, it's time for us to have a sharper focus on that. So what I'm recommending here is that we take that Conservation Commission piece and extract that and create a separate Conservation Commission. So we have appointed a Conservation Committee to help us sort through that because, as I said, the powers reside with the EPC right now, as well as some other boards, and we ought to do this carefully and pull it out in a way that makes sense for our town. The state actually has prescribed some of these powers for environmental commissions, and we need to pay attention to that, but there's a lot that we can customize that makes sense for us, and so I think we should spend some time on that. The Board of Selectmen tonight just voted to install the 7 members of that committee, so Bill Cavers, who I've spent a lot of time on and have a lot of respect for, He's going to be helping a lot with this, but I think, Priscilla, you're on it as well. And so we've got some good members, I think, that really can help us move this forward, and they're going to get started right away. I'm going to be ex officio to that committee to help them sort out how we could get a really good answer for the town to have an environmental commission. It's time to have that. Some other recommended changes that I'll flip through. I think if you look through the charter and ordinances, every time they talk about a board or commission, they've got all this language about setting it up and how often it meets and what the quorums are. And all of that needs to be stripped out of all of our documents and put into one spot with regard to how you're supposed to run meetings. It'll help people to have that in one place. We can use that to train against. Bobby had made some materials suggesting how we can do some rewording to accomplish that. I think that's going to be a big improvement. Second thing is we need to remove, where possible, requirements for officials to have certain characteristics or qualifications, or they have to come from certain committees. So, for example, right now we can't fully staff the Blight Review Board because one of the members has to come from the Human Services Commission, which is not staffed. And so I think we have enough trouble getting volunteers for committees. We need to strip all of that out and simply use the judgment of our committees and others to make sure that those people are qualified. We should not have position appointments. So unless it's specified by state law, which, by the way, is a blanket statement for all of this, we should be doing things consistent with state law where it's required. Right now, for example, the assessor has to be appointed. And an interesting point, by the way, our assessor used to be elected, right? And that role now has been an appointed role for, I think, half a century. It works fine, and it can work fine for those other three roles as well. But right now, that person has to be formally appointed for a 3-year term that has to be renewed. And no, they just need to be an employee of the town like everybody else. There's all that kind of language that can be stripped out. I think we need a better process for fines and fees. Right now, all that is in Schedule D of the charter, and we've wrestled with that recently with dog fines and all of that at Great Island. That process is really cumbersome in terms of how you modify fines, what the ordinances are that do this. Do the ordinances actually refer to fines that exist in Schedule D, which they don't in some cases? It almost demands a small committee to say, can we please straighten this out, because that is a nightmare to deal with and something that I think we should improve. And finally, on this page, we should consider something interesting I discovered that Greenwich does. They have what they call SNAC, S-N-A-C, a Selectmen's Nominations Advisory Committee. They've had it since 2004. It is fantastic. And what that committee does is it has members from all over town, and they will go and they will source, and they're mostly focused on advisory positions, not elected roles. The DTC and RTC over there still do that. These guys are great because they can pull from unaffiliated. So, as I said in my newsletter, I guess earlier this year, 42% of our electorate are unaffiliated voters, and they don't have a role with the DTC or the RTC. So this is a way to draw from a much broader group of people to try to populate our boards and commissions. The political committees would still have the first role in finding candidates for elective office, but this is a great way to get the word out and communicate more about opportunities in town and to have those applications go through a special committee like this. So more to come on that, but that's, I think, a creative idea that would make our ability to fill boards and commissions a whole lot more efficient. A few others. I'd like the Board of Selectmen to be changed to 1 meeting per month. We can add meetings if we need to, but many times we just don't need a second meeting. I'd like that to go to once a month. There's a provision in there that talks about an acting first selectman. I think that's important. If the first selectman becomes disabled or dies, you need to have an acting first selectman take over, and that person should be appointed by the board and put into place. But a lot of times I'm just traveling and I need somebody available to go in town for the weekend that I'm gone. And sometimes the acting first selectman is not available. I just need to appoint somebody for the few days that I'm going to be on vacation, but that's not provided for in the charter. I'd like that changed. So the other one is advisory commissions. Those are all commissions set up by the Board of Selectmen. The terms formally expire at the end of the year, and it was very difficult to get all that reappointed and sorted out at Christmas time. We need to get rid of that. I just want to put an advisory board, and we'll get rid of it when we need to, but we should eliminate that. And I can go through the rest of these. So another big one is the 10-day delay for appropriations. So you guys vote on an appropriation. By statute, by charter, we have to wait 10 days for that to be effective. And the reason for that is to allow for someone to go out and get a referendum to override their RTM. So I think we should preserve that authority, but the only time anybody's going to say we need to have a referendum is something gigantic. I mean, Great Island, a massive, a new high school, that's the type of thing that we talk about when we talk about a referendum. We don't need referendums for expenditures of $50,000. So I would propose increasing the 10-day delay threshold to something like $25 million. You guys got to think about it. But there's no reason to have the appropriation get voted on, and we have to stand around for 10 days before people can get started on just a simple project that everybody agrees with. So that's a change. And then finally, I think it's time for us to consider a leaf blower ordinance. Many other towns have those. I'll ask the environmental committee that we're working on to spend some time on that. This body considered that a while back, and when it did, it went, and Mac Patrick, you'd worked on it, Frank worked on it as well. I think the big start of that was to go talk to the police and see what complaints they were getting, and most of the complaints were around parties. They weren't around leaf blowers. I think part of that is that most people don't call the police when there's a leaf blower. Parties, I'll call the police for a party. Not my parties because they're sedate, but no, they're not calling the police for leaf blowers. And so I think going back and rethinking this a bit, I'm not in favor, I'm okay with date and hours, operating hours restrictions. A lot of other towns have those. I'm not okay with forcing landscapers to buy equipment. When you talk to them, they'll say, geez, I go out and spend $100,000 on stuff. That technology is evolving. New batteries or something else could make it obsolete in a couple of years. I'd rather wait until the technology is settled. I'm empathetic to that point of view. And then I think we should have a ban on roosters. I've had some people that have been real, it's a small thing. The cock-a-doodle-doo has got to go. But this is not Mayberry. We don't need roosters, and I think we should consider that. All right, I'm getting close to done. I got one more. We need to have an increase. We need to invest in some more technology for you guys. So that virtual meeting that we had the other day where we're fiddling around with votes and trying to get all this done, this is 2026. It's not 1826. It is time to make some changes. And so having big screens where we can see stuff in these presentations, having some kind of electronic voting, all of that stuff, that technology exists. Again, we have to do it consistent with what federal and state regulations are, but it is time to make some investments to really change that and make a significant effort to improve it. In the private sector, I would go to places where you could sit and vote with a device and have the results pop up onto a screen like that instantaneously instead of you guys having to stand up and do all this. You'll cut your meeting time by 20% just by that change alone. It's time to do that. I'm very supportive of coming up with that technology, but you guys are going to help me figure that out, because even though I say I want to be in the 21st century, I am a child of the 20th century, and I'm not the person to figure this out. Okay, a few other things on there: better monitors, better speakers and microphones in the meeting room. We had a hybrid meeting up in 206. Those individuals were not able to participate in that meeting. That's got to change. I want an on-air light for all television. So if TV 79 is recording and the cameras are on, there needs to be an on-air light. We've run into trouble with executive sessions and all that in the past. And I think as a general matter, I certainly would be appreciative of saying, I just look up, if there's a light on, then that camera's on. If it's off, then the cameras are off. And then, Jim, some of you and your colleagues have talked about some investments. We need to change the equipment up here that I think is an excellent idea. And I'll try to go out and solicit some foundation money to help with that, but I'd like to come up with a coordinated plan to improve technology. This feels like it's outside of the charter effort, but there's likely some language in there in terms of empowering how you guys vote for things that we should consider and change at the same time to make use of better technology throughout here. Okay. I'm going to close with a couple of philosophical points that have just been floating in my mind, and I want to make sure that you think about it as you go through your charter changes. So the first one is this notion of how do you distribute power between elected officials and professionals. So you'll see this in forms of government in Connecticut. So I do a presentation at the high school, and one of the things it talks about is, well, where the heck does the Board of Selectmen government come from? I'm going to do a newsletter on that. But in that, you'll find that there's a form of government called a town manager form of government. It's actually the most prevalent form of government in the United States. And what these towns do is they'll vote for a mayor and a city council. That mayor and city council will appoint a professional town manager, and that person is the chief executive officer of the town. So the mayor really is just ceremonial and does parades and will evaluate the town manager, but the town manager runs the town as a professional. And they've made a decision that says, we run the town better the more we outsource this to professionals. There's a big debate about that. But the question is as we think about this, is Darien out of balance in any particular way? So one of the ways I think we're out of balance is in those 3 elected officials that I mentioned. Those roles, as I said, have become more technical. We'll benefit as a town by having them filled or set up to be filled in the future by trained professionals as opposed to elected officials. Now, there's a fine line to draw there, but as you go and think about, not these changes, but just any others, think about this philosophical question, and are we as a town striking the right balance? I have a lot to say about it, so when you guys do start to talk about it or have committees, I'll be happy to come by and talk to you at length about that. The other philosophical question is this one. So I said before that maybe the right thing is for the RTM is to have a little bit of an override authority over the Board of Finance. There's another way to look at that. You could make a change in how the government is structured, or you could say, I don't like what that guy's doing, or that person who voted for this, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to run against them. I'm going to present a choice to the electorate and let them decide between 2 competing visions as to how that should be done. We have competitive elections here in town, but not that much. In November, I will be an elected official in this town for 18 years. I've never faced an opponent. Not on the Board of Finance, and there's a lot of positions here that go year after year and nobody challenges them. So before we make a change in government that says, I need to take power away from this particular board, right? Think about it yourselves. If you guys don't like something, get up and go run for these positions. I don't like that. I'm going to present a competing view to the electorate, and I'm going to try to convince them to vote for me so I can change that. I think that's something to keep in mind. I don't know that the answer is always to change structure of government, and I say this because of our special act. You guys have the ability to make changes much more easily in our town charter than other towns. Use that power carefully and take into account whether a better answer might be to say, I don't like this, I'm going to run against the person who made that decision and get voters to throw them out of office. Okay. Next steps, 2 quick slides. So for the summer, I think we need to continue to gather perspectives. Amy has gotten some from your committee that I thought was actually very helpful, recommendations. Town Council, Bobby, have got some as well. I haven't heard from many people in terms of ideas, but I've gotten a few from some department heads. I'd like to start to figure out a way, and maybe you and Amy and I can sit down to talk about how we can collect those all in one spot so that you guys can take a look at them. But I want to figure out how to start to codify that and to pull it all into one spot so that everybody can take a look at the inventory of ideas we've come up with. My summer project for my summer vacation is I'm going to set up meetings with all chairs of all boards and commissions in town, and I'm just going to ask, how's it going? Here is what the charter says about what you're supposed to be doing. Here's some ancient paperwork we have in the Board of Selectmen's office as to what your mission and mandate is. Let's take a fresh look at that. Is that working for you? If it is, that's great. We'll codify that. If it's not, this process could actually help sharpen up that commission. Again, in the spirit of trying to make it work better for the people who are part of that. And then finally, I think, and I'm glad our attorneys are here, it's going to be really important as this motors along to make sure that we're not doing something that's outside what's permitted by state or federal law, and that we're doing this properly to end up with something in the end that has been fully vetted by our lawyers to make sure it's right, and we'll start to make sure that's done. And then for the fall and winter, we'll finalize our collection. I do want to split this, or recommend that we split this between having the ideas that can be presented clearly versus the actual wording and all the charter and ordinance language. I looked at some of that from previous efforts. It's very dense material and hard to read and understand. So I think having you all vote on the ideas where you can look at them and say, I want to do that's clear. And then once that's decided, to then have it translated into actual ordinance and charter language changes is going to be a better way and more easily explainable way to do this. And I think that's important because I would do public hearings with those simple ideas before we even get to the rewriting of charter and ordinance language, to show the public what we're thinking about. And if we're not going to have a charter review commission, which we shouldn't, that means we're going to have to be super aggressive about that. Just listening to the conversation before, I spend nearly all my time trying to communicate. I communicate every day. I give speeches, I write newsletters, I do videos, and still people will come up and say, who are you? What form of government do we have? Johnny Z? We don't know who that guy is. It's endless, but it just means that there's a lot of people out there that just don't pay attention to town government. We need to be communicating early and often throughout this process. I don't want anybody in town to think that this effort was not communicated or that we made decisions that were a surprise. We don't want that. There's 100 of you guys. We can do this and do this well. Once all that's done, we'll translate this into the actual documents and then schedule a final public hearing and an RTM vote. And all the stuff that gets left on the cutting room floor, maybe we'll start a phase 2 and try to consider those ideas. But again, you don't have to do this all at once. Let's approach this gently, try some changes, and then see what happens. So I believe that's all I have. I think this is going to be an important effort for our town. Keeping in mind, I'm humble because prior efforts did not succeed. This is a messy form of government, as Sir Winston Churchill has aptly described in his past. But I think if we work together on this, that we can come up with something that people will look back and say, that was fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Well, we've begun the process. We have the Rules Committee assigned to the districts the role of looking at the charter, looking at change, to give us some sort of an organizational framework to start talking about the ideas. And so the district chairs will meet Thursday for their second meeting to go through what the results of their first district meeting were like, what did they find out, how are we going about it, and what works, what doesn't, and see if we can come up with some ideas that make sense and make some change happen. I will admit my guilt at having been around in let me think. It was a while back when we did the first real stab at charter revision, and it was a long process and didn't work out very well at all. We're doing it differently this time. We've got some guidance on what First Selectman's looking for, and we also have some opportunity ourselves, which doesn't come along very well, to update our charter and the way we do business. And that's a plus all the way around. Dave, I want to make sure that I announced this early. I did, but I'll repeat it again. Dave Smith was elected to the board was nominated to the Board of Elections and elected, 68 in favor, 2 no, 6 abstentions. Board of Ethics. What did I say? Oh. So, congratulations. So I guess I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Oh, so many. All those in favor. No, we had, the results of the, excuse me, yeah, I'm sorry. The sump pump passed, 67 in favor, 10 no, 2 abstentions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now you can rise.